that you're what is this?
Right. So I guess kind of creating a level of narcissism where they believe that they're much better than they
And
are.
what they are here.
Fair enough. Any other different opinions of what toxic parenting is
I
or
think
isn't?
I think, like I said before, I think the notion of do as I say, not as I do is very toxic. I think parents should lead by example. But what I do want to highlight is I actually don't think that the just because a parent is toxic is not an absence of love, as in it's not that saying that they don't love you, it's just some of their behaviors are toxic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if you say there's instant toxicity, instant or spontaneous one which is perpetuated, right? I think that is just making us allowing for our human behaviors to show, human frailties and weaknesses to show, right? I think it becomes toxic when it becomes a repeated action over a period, because that's it. Something that occurred only once or a few times does not really affect your psychological being or emotional being. It is when it is.
I don't think it's the frequency of it, but I think it's the
Impact.
gravity of it. Yeah. So it might be once, but it impacted your life in a very big way. So I don't think it's
what about if it was once and impacted your life and the person comes back to say they are sorry?
I think
that doesn't make it not toxic. I mean, it just makes it that it was an incident.
It's a toxic action. It's a toxic action, but does that necessarily mean it's a toxic parenting?
Okay. I mean, I get that. So we already have a question in, which was something I was going to address. I'll answer it live. It says, how can you love and your behavior is toxic at the same time? So here's the thing. Actually, most toxic parents do things from the position of love. There are lots of people that have been really strict, like beating kids to the point of abuse because they want them to be the best child they can be. And so they will beat you and then tell you how much they love you. There are parents that won't allow their kids to do anything socially, all that thing, because they don't want them to be contaminated. And for them, like those things can allow for toxicity to be done. There are parents that don't want you to be the way they were. Sandra was saying, do as I say, not as I do. There are parents that were really wild. And then they now want their kids to be these extreme nuns that don't do anything. And they're not allowing them to live. And it's from a place of love because they don't want you to go through what they have been through. I saw a hand shoot up. Has it gone?
Yeah, and you're right. And that's I think predominantly where we're coming from is actually what actually causes it. It's either where we're coming from or what is happening in our environment. That's what actually pushes for toxicity. Based on the things that we've been through, we tend to everybody parents a child from the experiences that they've had. Do you get it? Everybody parents a child from the experiences they've had. So, growing up, I will explain to you. Growing up, you might have said, "Oh, because I went through this, there's no way I will allow my child to go through it." Right? And that already has formed in your head that, hey, I'm never going to allow my child to go through this. And you will do everything for that child not to go through this, even if you have to manipulate them without realizing that you're actually manipulating the child. If you have to, whichever way because you have been through it. At times, you might explain to the child, if you realize that the child is not getting it, you might employ other means. At all costs, you don't want the child to go through that. Even though at times, experience is the best teacher for that child.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about an impoverished person. So when you're really broke, and then like Pastor, I think he uses this analogy, it's like you don't want your kids to be broke or struggle. So then you end up with a point where you lavish them to the point of obscenity. Like they don't value anything. You're just giving them, giving them, giving them. So that's also extreme. You know, where's the moderation? You just don't want them to go through what you do, and you go extreme.
Yeah, somebody said extreme experience is not always the best teacher, and that is why you don't want them to go through it at all, right? And you not wanting them to go through it, it's a difficult position to be for a parent at times, especially, God forbid, if you have a child that's a bit rebellious in that wise.
But we can't trivialize toxicity by blaming it on past experience of our parents. Like some people, like some people have very loving childhoods and, you know, loving parents, and they just end up being abusers. So where do we draw the line as to, you know, humanizing our parents for their behavior, and then also, you know, actually they're actually toxic and we need help here, we need help as a family? So how do you know or determine the difference?
I think the first thing that we all you need to agree on this one, that everybody is a function of their background. No matter who you become today, your values are a function of your background and your culture. They play a big part in who you are. And if that's the case, we are not using it as an excuse. Somebody once told me that, oh, if you're not taught, then teach yourself. Right? So you cannot use it as an excuse, right? But it must be acknowledged that, oh, I'm a function of my background. So I'll give you an example. I have always said that no matter what happens, I will never, ever, and thank God, God is going to help me with faith, but it has nothing to do with my faith, right? That I will never, ever divorce. And it has nothing to do with my faith. It's only because I came from a home that is broken, and I saw the impact of it in my life. Do you get where I'm coming from? So the decisions, those underlying thoughts in our head at times, those underlying values are a function of where we're coming from. And it's the values that makes us behave in funny ways.
Okay, let's highlight a particular toxic behavior so that I can understand where that could come from. So, I mean, what's a toxic behavior? Like putting your children down in terms of, like, you know, putting them down in terms of their self-esteem. Where could that stem from? I'm using that as an example. That is toxic behavior, right?
100%.
Okay, so where could that stem from?
100%. And it could also stem from that parents also their own self-belief as well. Do you get what I'm coming from? They might not even believe in themselves, and they are reflecting that on the child.
So, hi Deacon Killer. So, at what point do you now say that, okay, this needs to stop? This is wrong.
At what point do you say it is wrong?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I'm not excusing toxicity in any way or form. I'm just looking at what leads to it, what causes it.
Some of the causes.
Do you get it? So because I said his background does not mean it is right. That doesn't make sense. It is wrong in any way or form. I'm just trying to look at what, because at times when we know what causes something, it's easier to deal with. Right? So for example, we are in a generation where a lot of young people do not have fathers, or resident fathers, as it were. Right? If they don't pay attention, or they don't really learn what we're talking about now, it's possible that it's going to affect them when they start having their own children as well. Because girls would raise up their girls not to trust guys, for example. It's a toxicity.
I'm joking.
Okay. I think I was mentioning earlier that there's a New York Times bestseller actually called Toxic Parents, and the subheading is Overcoming the Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. And this is by psychologists, which means that ultimately you're always going to be affected by this toxicity, and you'll react one way or another, the same way that you hear often that abusers abuse, or you have people that somehow manage to conquer it and then are working to make sure that it doesn't happen to other people. But it's important that you learn to unlearn these behaviors, because they will inherently form you, because that's, you know, life is about nature versus nurture. And if you spend your formative years in an environment that is toxic, it's going to impact you in one way, shape, or form. I'm going to cite a really long ago case, which some of you may remember, when Rihanna and Chris Brown had their altercation. And obviously Chris Brown beat her to a pulp. We all saw the images. And then we went into Chris Brown's history of how he was raised. And apparently his father had been very, very aggressive and had done the same thing to his mum. And he had vowed that he would never do that. And for all intents and purposes, he'd been a great son. But he found himself in a position where, when he was pushed to a corner, that behavior did manifest. And I'm not here to excuse what happened, but for somebody that was so anti it and had seen it happen, he thought that it had affected him to the point that he would never be that person. But oftentimes, the things that you're trying to not be, you end up seeing because it's something that actually you're used to.
And it's inherent. Now, I also want to say that, see, the best tonight for those who are actually listening and being part of this, the best way you can get much from today is, I think, not to try to blame you can blame the people that has gone ahead of us who are parents, but much more to start to pay attention to what is being discussed so that you don't repeat it on your children. Because the truth is, you might not be able to do things, you might not be able to do anything about the people that are ahead of you, but you can avoid it happening to the people that you are parenting. Or you can help somebody out in managing. I think if people, all of us, look at it from that angle, it might just help us to become better parents in future.
But Pope, don't you think that sometimes you need to heal the source first before you actually, grow into being, the full capacity or the full potential of the parent that you're supposed to be? I know that, most relationships is like the damage is done for a lot of toxic parental relationships. The damage is done, and it just feels like, but sometimes don't you feel like you need to go back to the source to heal that, to move forward? Or do you think you can move forward without even going back and mending that relationship?
Ideally, you're right. Yeah, it's always better to heal things first before you move on. But I quickly scrolled through the list of people who are participants, and most of the names that I saw there are actually Africans. And because most of the people there are from the African culture, right? At times it's always very difficult to call our parents to order.
Difficulty doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I know you can have the boldness to, but at the end of the day, it might actually be seen as rude or disrespectful. However, the best way to do that, or the ways to communicate such things, right, is meant to be discussed. We can't just say that, oh, everybody should go ahead and do that, right? But because that might even make some relationship worse off than it is currently. Does that make sense? And it's worth looking at how best do you communicate that to your parents.
Okay, I'm gonna speak from an unlearned point of view, as in, layman. I think you need to do it for yourself, regardless of what the outcome is. If a relationship is already broken, you actually need to speak up if that hurt is actually affecting you in your day-to-day life. You need to speak up, I think.
Okay. So you're right. If you're going to speak up, why not speak up? See, I believe we don't have parents that are demons, right? I believe that our parents, oftentimes, they love us, right? If they don't love you, possibly they would have killed you before now, right? Or they would have done, you will not be who you are today. So I believe that our parents, as much as possible, have a bit of love for us at the least. And love is expressed in feelings, right? So if you go to your parents and you let them know how it makes you feel, Daddy, this thing that you do, this is the way it makes me feel, right? It's more receptive than going to them and telling them that what they are doing is wrong. You see that the approach is different. Do you get it? If you approach your parents from the place that you feel, from how you feel, I believe that they will respect how you feel much more than you trying to come and correct your parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that would be the how you would approach it. No, I mean it needs to be an open dialogue that this is actually affecting me. This is affecting my day-to-day life.
You'll be surprised that some people will shout at their parents for that. I don't ever do this to me again. You don't even know.
Because it requires a level of maturity. When you're going through healing, you'll be in different stages of healing, like grief. So somebody might still be angered. And if you go with that approach, it's actually just going to make it blow up. But if you're able to recognize what's going on, and you require godly wisdom to do this, the reality, because every parent is going to be different. There are some parents that you can actually go to and say, I'm really not happy about what you're doing. And they'll be like, oh, what's going on? Some parents, you say that and you're being rude to them. So you really, like, I know that it seems like there's so much onus on the person that's being hurt, but unfortunately, we are also the people that require the healing, and we need to be able to recognize how to deal with different people.
I must not also forget the place of mediation in approaching it as well.
Yeah.
Mediation might not be a bad idea as well.
We've got Rabbi on the call.
Thank you. So I wanted to share a bit of experience from my childhood growing up. As a youngster, as a very, very young child, I'm quite an emotional person, and I'd always been growing up. And my mum was quite, she was very, very vocal, very, very vocal. And she would call me names whenever I didn't do well. And that's why some of you probably know, I do not appreciate anyone calling my kids anything negative. I've said that to my wife, I've said that to my friends. If you're so upset at my kids, call them blessed. I don't mind you even smacking them, but don't call them any negative names, because it affected me growing up, calling me stupid, dull, foolish, and I'd always started to think myself as that. And I would often, in my older brother, and I've said it too many times, I know people might have joked about, I still shared it on my birthday, when I said I had to tell my brother to speak to my wife now when I first met her. It wasn't because I couldn't talk, but I just felt I wasn't smart, I wasn't good enough. So I would always ask him to push ahead for me. And that's because of what my parents or my mother would have always said about me while I was growing up. And when I had the chance, when I grew up, when I was old enough to actually confront her, I was a teenager. And I was so upset because she would call me names and she would point out people who are better than me. Do you understand? So at one point, I looked up to her and I said, please never call me that anymore, because it is worrying me, it is bringing me down, and I'm supposed to be your child. And if you grow old, I hope you will call those people to come and take care of you. And I got the biggest slap in my whole life. She cried, she cried, I cried, but we didn't speak for like 3 weeks in the same house. So it was my father who came in and actually sat me down and tried to reason why I said what I said. He spoke to my mom, but he got to realize that these things that my mom had always been calling me, and I guess she did it because when she was growing up, it was what they would call her. So it cascaded to what she started doing to us as kids. And when I explained to my dad how it was affecting me, he spoke to her, and I guess we had to just, and as what Pope said, rightly said, the way you approach it is very, very important. I went to her mad. My dad had to speak to her and explain to her why I felt the way I felt and why I did the way I did it. Do you understand? And then we can both now come to terms with it. And also, one thing I also realized is also it's a cultural thing, because also growing up for a very long time, I thought my mom was the very harsh one, my dad was the very loving one. But I got to realize over time that it would be my dad instigating my mom in like, see, look at your children, you see how they're not performing, you see, and the blame was always going to her, to the point that she would now couldn't take it anymore and she would lash out at us. Do you understand?
So from that that turning point, how did your relationship pan out after that event?
So growing up, actually, I said to my mum at one point, no, I didn't say to my mum, I said to my siblings, I was still a very young child, very stupid and foolish. But I said to them, when mum dies, and this was about the age of 9, 10, I will not be at her graveside because of how she's treated me. Do you understand? But now that my eyes have opened and I've come to understand a lot of what she did from a point of, she didn't go to school. She was supposed to go to school, but because her parents were poor, she passed on her own education to her younger ones. And being a woman, she was the first child, so she thought her younger brother would best serve the family if he went to school. But in her heart of hearts, she'd always wanted her kids to be the best at what they do. And how she knew how to express it was to push us to the limits, not knowing that pushing us, each one of us had our different characters. While I was emotional, my brother enjoyed that push. I didn't enjoy that push. And because I didn't have that hand around me, I just felt it was too toxic for me. But after the talk between myself and her, me and my mom now, we're best of friends. We understand each other. We understand what makes me tick and what doesn't make me tick. So harsh words for me wouldn't suffice. Do you understand? I needed her to show me that confidence, to show me that love, and to show me that sincerity, and that's what I will run with. Do you understand? So as we are now, we are best of friends. We are great. We both understand each other, and how that relationship works out. It's been amazing. So at times, some of these things that we do as parents, at times we haven't got this blueprint. We have to learn, as Pastor said, because it happened to you doesn't mean you should carry on. Do you understand? But at times, we seen it helps us to improve our own relationship with our children. We now know what we wouldn't like, and so we push that aside, and what worked, what is good, is what we should always take on board and run with. But we make mistakes as parents. There's no parent that I know who doesn't make mistakes. You might not admit it to your kids, but you learn and try not to do it again.
Just for the
Thanks
sake
so much.
of, sorry, just one last question. For the sake of the viewers, for the sake of the listeners, how long did it take you to get to a place where, you know, there was a lot of hurt and anger, to a place where you appreciated your parents? Like, what was the time?
It was in my teenage days. I used to write a lot. Like I said, I'm a very emotional person. I used to have, and that's why I grew up learning how to take notes a lot. I would sit in my room and I'd write poems. I started my first company in Nigeria doing newspapers and editing, not newspapers, like magazines. Most of what I wrote came from my bedroom. Do you understand? And how I would think, and I was a big thinker. I would think about everything. So I was a teenager I think I was about 17 at the time when I looked my mom in the face. I'd never had that courage. I don't know how it came about, but that day it was just so painful that she would compare me to different people with all what I'm trying to do for the family. And it just felt like it was never enough for them. And so she would compare me to those who were exceeding. And I just felt that was wrong. But it took me from the day I was probably born to the age of about 17 plus. And after that, I think things started working out better. I'm 40 now, if you don't know. So maybe about 23 years now, it's been a very blissful relationship.
Number one, thanks so much, Richard. We really appreciate your openness and vulnerability. Now, question for you. How, considering what you went through early years, the fact that Ashworth don't do it for you, how were you able to balance it out such that you don't move to the other extreme in raising up your own children? Because there's a place for everything. How were you able to ensure that you don't get to the point of overpraising your children, right? Because doing that as well can end up being toxic on the other side. How were you able to get that balance in parenting?
And that's why I said you will learn. You observe, you learn what is good, you take on board. Yes, sometimes harsh words were used, but when we do use these harsh words, and I don't use harsh words on my kids. I mean, I might give a smack or two, but I do ensure that it doesn't take long before I embrace them back. And I explain that to them, that I did this not because I don't love you, but I give the reason and I stipulate it. I would normally tell them, listen, you've done it 5, 6 times. I've said to you kindly, please don't do it. And you're not listening. And so if that's not working, you need to know that another approach needs to come in. So I try to balance it. So if I've said the nice words 3, 4 times, it's not working, I have to evaluate what works. And so I might need to be a little bit more stern in what I tell them, and see which one would work and at which point. It's not in everything that I use harsh words, it's not in everything you give praise. I'll give another example. My wife believes, she would normally say, when my kids do well, she's quick to say, you know what, buy them a gift. And I said, that doesn't always work, because what you're doing is you're spoiling them to a point. I would just say to them, well done, you've done very well, thank you. But she's like, that's not enough. You have to get them something. But when you keep getting something, you always keep buying, because every day they do something, they're like, okay, mommy, I've done it now. I need another gift. So how long do you want to keep buying this gift? So at times they should learn to accept appreciation. You've done well. Well done, my son. God bless you. And take that and run with it. So I think for me, it's a balance. Just knowing what works at what point, and don't overdo it.
Thank you so much.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Rabbi, for sharing that insight. And it's very, very interesting to hear. Earlier, Pope, you made an observation that looking at the list of viewers, majority of them are African. And then obviously you tied that into the fact that we have, there's culture that we have to adhere to when it comes to addressing levels of toxicity, if that's the word to use. But I'm a strong believer that there's something within African culture, especially, well, me being Nigerian, especially within Nigerian culture, that actually promotes toxicity in parents to their children. And it does it to the extent that it forces children to be submissive or be such that they can't approach or speak about certain things. Now, you mentioned speaking about things in a very calm and respectful way. And oftentimes, many people have tried that. I've tried that. And I remember I tried it for a long time. And it got to the point that it just didn't work. It wasn't working. So I had to try things a different way. Because, yes, I grew up being I'm a very cultural man. But as much as there's culture, there's also moral. And when you look at your moral compass, you have to look at where you are mentally. Look at the things that affect you. And irrespective of the outcome of how things may go, you have to deal with certain things. Perfect example for me is my father. I had a very toxic relationship with him. I had a good relationship at times, but I had a toxic relationship with him. And I remember trying to deal with it in a very nice, apologetic way, especially when I was much younger. But as I started getting older and I weighed things out, I said, you know what, I can't carry on doing this. Now, I dealt with things, some of the ways in which I dealt with some things were a bit aggressive. But at that time, it helped. And what it helped do is it helped to establish the fact that, yes, I'm your child, but I'm not for the rest of my life going to be under your scrutiny or I'm not a slave to you. I'm a child to you. I was born to you, given to you by God. And yeah, fair enough, you're my parent, but it doesn't mean that because you're my parent, I should now carry on taking. It's the same as if you look at someone in an abusive relationship. It would be immoral for someone who's being physically abused day in, day out, for you to say, that's fine, just go back, pray for your husband, it's fine. Keep going back, keep going back, keep going back, keep going back, until the point when she dies. Then the person's blood is on your hand because you told that person to keep going back simply because you were trying to stick to culture or being respectful.
So number one is that I did not use culture to excuse it. What I said is that because all of us are from an African background, respect comes into everything that we do, right? And it would be unwise for us to remove that from everything that we do. And that is why accepting that will help us navigate the waters. Does that make sense? So I'm not excusing it based on culture. I'm just saying that whether I would like it or not, it has to be considered in everything that we do, and then that will inform the approach that we use in resolving any issue that is. Does that make sense, Sandra?
Yeah, I think we need to establish the difference between toxicity and abuse, because obviously abuse is detrimental in any kind of form. I'm laughing, but it's just because it's awkward. But toxicity, it can happen in peaks and troughs, right? I mean, is there any way that toxicity can ever be healthy? I don't know, because from the inputs that we've had, it's just like, okay, so sometimes you can grow from toxicity, and it's because we're placing not the blame, but placing the origin of that behavior from something that they've experienced in the past. When do we know, when can we identify that this is actually just not it, this is wrong?
I think when you go ahead.
No, I was going to say that toxicity is always going to be wrong. I think the one thing that we were saying, that people are human, so they will always make mistakes, as it were. I don't think there's any issue with calling things out when they're done wrongly, but you also need to learn how to read the room, because there are times when people act out and you shut it down immediately. And there are times when you let things slide, because it's not every battle that's worth fighting. In the same way, people's toxic behaviors, you need to know how to mitigate against them. But for me, toxicity, abuse is one and the same. They're all exerting power in the wrong way.
Yeah, you're right. Toxicity, that word, and abuse, virtually the same. It's just a form of abuse, right? You realize some of us will give our children so much chocolate, out of love, right? It's still abuse. Did you get it? So yeah, same difference.
When you're talking about reading the room, though, like a lot of our African upbringing or Nigerian culture,
Ghana culture.
Okay, Ghana. I can only speak from a Nigerian point of view. It actually enables you to, like, it enables your trauma by allowing you to suffer in silence. That's what is pushed into you, that you need to respect by any means necessary. Respect is higher above your level of self-respect as well, and what you can do or what you can take. So how do we navigate through that, still trying to maintain our independence and our individuality, as well as trying to heal from hurt or avoid pain per se? How do we do that and then still read the room and make sure it's an appropriate time to open our hearts to actually say what's wrong?
See, the result of the poll makes me laugh, right? It says 8% of the people on this poll.
Yeah.
That's why you laugh.
Because it's an African thing.
No, it's not an African thing. The way we experience it in Africa is different from the way other people experience it, right? But is the reality of it. Toxic parenting, come on, for it to be a bestseller in the USA, then it's a common phenomenon everywhere. It's just that we use our own from the position of respect and subservience, right? Like you said, do what I say, don't do what I do. Marley just used that for me this afternoon, right? It is what we know to do. So it's a common thing everywhere. It's just that we suffer it in a common way. Does that make sense?
If I work the children that I teach, they're all of the. If you look at it from a culture, majority of them are white, Cockney, few black, some Asians, and I listen to all the things that they actually go through from a toxic point of view, and it's actually crazy. It's actually very crazy. And the thing is, you have to speak to these children, you have to advise them, and help them navigate how to deal with these things. There's a reason why a girl at 14 thinks it's all right for her to have a child right now, simply because of how things are in her household. In fact, she's trying to get pregnant. simply because that's what she believes is the right way forward. You know, it's normal for her boyfriend to be 23, 25 years old, but that's toxic.
And also illegal.
And
they don't see that side.
No, it's toxic and illegal, but it just shows you how much, even though those things are true, in that society, some things are just accepted. And some of the houses that I go into, I hear how parents and children talk to each other. I see mum and son swearing and all sorts at each other, and I can never imagine me doing that to my mum. Like, they talk as if to say that they're the same age. And yes, you can have a good relationship with your parent and talk in a very banterish kind of way, but not to the extent that you're about to hit your parent, or you tell them to shut up and F off and all this and all that. And when I speak to these kids about why is it that they're doing that with their parents, it's because, number one, they've seen the mum and dad do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it every day, regularly, on a consistent basis. Number two, they see everyone around that family do that. And number three, the way that the parents relate with the children, they relate with the children as though they're already grown up anyway. From the age of 12, 8, 9, 10, they understand things that these 30, 40, 50-year-olds already understand.
Which is toxic on its own.
Which is toxic on its own, which is why you're more likely to see a young white boy of 5 years old easily influenced and being easily racist, able to throw out racist terms, whether to a black person to an Asian person, than you are to see with a black child. Because the way we've been raised isn't like that. So there's so many different levels of toxicity that we just...
It's still cultural though, isn't it, to a certain degree? Because
the expression of it is cultural.
Yeah, the expression is cultural.
Cecilia.
Yeah.
Sorry, you've been waiting forever.
To be honest, this topic is giving me a headache. But I'll try to. I'm very serious. But I'll try to be as articulate as possible. Can we talk about situations where parents raise each child differently? So it's very easy for us to say their parents, they are still human beings, they make a mistake, right? It's a mistake if it happens one time or it happens twice, not when it happens to certain children and not the others. Let me give an example. I have two sisters, I have two younger sisters and a younger brother. And I can tell you for a fact that in as much as there is a wide gap between myself and my younger sister, I can tell you that my sisters and I were raised in a different way than my brother, which did not make any sense to me. And the result of that is my mom, not even my dad, because my mom was very strict with my sisters and I. And when it came to my brother, she was very lax. And the result of that is my sisters and I, when we were teenagers, we rebelled in our own different ways, but we were rebellious in one way or another. And my brother did absolutely nothing. He was like the perfect child. And this is because you will just be sitting down on your own and then she will just bring problems to you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Their parenting on the oldest and the middle, they waste all their parenting, all their discipline, and when it comes to the last one, they're lax.
The thing is, my brother is actually after me, immediately after me.
So there's your brother, then your
and my two sisters. Okay. Exactly. So I'm saying that she treated me the same way she treated my youngest sister, but she did not treat my brother the same way, right? And I'm telling you that it's not as if we turned out better because she was stricter with us, right? If at all we rebelled, which I believe is normal. I was discussing this with my fiance, and I was saying that it doesn't make any sense to try to hold back, especially teenagers, as prisoners. Because I'm even saying, look at all four of us under one roof. We were brought up differently and we turned out differently. Now all of us have sense, but at the time, like, there was something in our head that we just wanted. I don't know how to explain it, but it was Can
you give a specific example?
Cecilia, God bless you. Right?
Let me give an example.
Go.
Let me give an example. Somebody asked me one day, somebody said, would you be more worried about your male child or your female child being promiscuous. And I said I'll be more worried about the male child, because if a female child sleeps with 9 people, she can only get pregnant once. If a male child sleeps with 9 different people, he can get all 9 of them pregnant. And that is a big issue, especially for a teenager. So let me give an example, right? We were not, boys, the truth, we were not, my sisters and I, because we were girls, holidays will be at home like 2-4-7, not allowed to go anywhere. My brother will come and say he wants to go to his friend's house. He'll be allowed to go to his. It did not make any sense to me. Why can he go to his friend's house and I can't go to my friend's house? Or his friends will come over to the house and we couldn't bring friends over. For crying out loud, I went to an all-girls school, so it was not as if I was bringing a boy to my house. It would obviously be a girl, right? I mean, I've known Joke since I was in high school. I think Joke is the only person that ever visited me for some weird reason. And that was even for one day, and it was a very short visit. We were not allowed to sleep outside the house, but my brother could. There were certain things that, it was so annoying. Like, there were certain things that my brother could get away with, but we could not. And I don't know why.
Okay.
So it's very easy for us to say their parents, they make mistakes, but it's clearly not a mistake when you're applying different parenting methods to each of your children.
All right. So there's something that is embedded in the African culture, or there are some things that are embedded in the African culture when it comes to parenting. There's biased parenting in African culture. It's embedded. So, for example, if you have a family of 3, the first one will be the strength, right? They will pour their effort in the first one. The last one will be the one that is spoiled. The middle one will be the one that's neglected, right? When you have a family like yours, where you have only one boy, in fact, there's a name for it in the Yoruba language. I don't know whether there's a name for it. It's called Okolawo, right? So you realize that one is just the spoiled one, right? They can get away with mother. It's just parental bias in Africa. Or let's even assume that there was equal number in everything. Like my family were 4-4, right? It was a perfect football team, right? 4 one side, 4 a side, right? Then you realize that the last one could get away with anything, even up to now can get away with anything. The first one, nothing can happen. The first boy, that's the third person, but he's the first boy, right? Is my mother's favorite, right? You know, so all those biases are embedded into the African culture, unfortunately.
It's still toxic.
Sorry?
Yeah.
It's still toxic.
No, I'm not saying they're not toxic. She asked the question, why is it like that? Because they're embedded in the African culture. And honestly, I cannot speak for it, and I cannot give a reason why it is like that. But yes, it is toxic.
How do you deal with that as an adult?
Exactly. Like, at what point do we say this is wrong? At what point do we stop our parents from thinking that they have to treat, I don't want to say shield, but treat the girls as prisoners because they're afraid that something will happen to them, they'll get pregnant or raped or something, and not treat the boys the same way? Because in as much as we are shielding our girls, we are shielding them from the boys, so to speak, from evil boys, from preying upon them. Is that not the time where you focus on the boys and raise them right?
Someone said black people need therapy and God. Now, Cecilia, you are the eldest in the home, right? To a large extent now, your parents can listen to you, right? There's this adage that they always say, they came for the Jews. I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. They came for the Romans. I did not speak up because I was not a Roman. They came for the Greek. I did not speak up because I was not a Greek. And they came again, and I looked around, and I was the only one remaining, right? You are now the adult. You can speak up for the younger ones, right?
Oh, I do.
Wait. And it's not about, like we said earlier, it's not about that confrontation, but more first asking to understand, oh, mommy, daddy, why is it that this is the way you actually raised us up? It is not about questioning. This is where the respect bar is going to be used. If you try to challenge their behavior, but rather you want to understand why it was like that. Then they might be able to explain to you why they felt that is the best way to go by it. Do you get it? You'll be surprised how much it is part of it that they ensure that you went to a girls' school in particular, not a mixed school, right? It might be coming from a position of fear as well.
I don't think it is fair to say we raised you this way and we raised your brother this way, because I feel if at all he should be the one you should teach more, because I get that a lot of
men just done now. You have just exhibited the same bias that's most likely.
No, I'm just saying, if at all you want to treat one particular child a different way, or one gender of children a different way, it should be the male gender. I'm not saying it is right. I'm saying if at all, treat all of us the same way, because what happened as a result of the way my parents treated us was all three of us girls pulled away. Right? You see, hey God, my relationship with my parents has come a long way, because if it was me of 10 years ago talking, I did not even want to have anything to do with them. I rarely called home. I did, if at all I was having a conversation with them, it would be that it was necessary. Maybe I was going back to school and I needed school fees, or I was asking for money or something. It was so bad that there was a time my mom took me to a psychologist, and she was complaining to the psychologist that I don't talk to her. I was a teenager then, I remember very clearly. And she was complaining that I don't talk to her, I don't let her in. And in my mind, I didn't say it out, but in my mind I was like, because everything I say, you're going to use it against me, so what's the point?
Cecilia, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Do you think that you've moved on from that situation? Because obviously the bright side of this is I think, or I believe, that you won't have that bias, or you won't have that gender gap when it comes to raising your children. But do you think that your relationship now with your parents, or that particular toxicity, have you healed from it, would you say?
Yes, I would, because now I actually sometimes they're still raising my sisters, but sometimes when they do certain things, they actually come to me, because I've called them out so many times that what you're doing is not. Because I remember there was a time my sister had an argument with my mom. I can't remember what it was about, and she said, that is why you push people away, right? And my mom came to me, and I think that really got to her, and she came to me and she was asking me questions, and I sat her down and I was like, look at the pattern of how you raised us, and look at like what the result is now. Do you think this is what you want to live with? Do you want to get to a point where your children don't talk to you at all? Right? And I think she reflected on that. And now, sometimes when she wants to react the normal Nigerian mother way, she comes to me first and has the discussion. And sometimes I tell her, don't say anything to this person. Let me speak to them, because they are more likely to open up to me than to you. So now I've become like the go-between. I've become like the go-between, but our relationship is so much better. I think majorly because when we were older, I think all three of us have had like a huge fight with my mom that basically made her brain reset, so to speak. I'm just so to speak. We've had like one huge fight, each of us.
Yeah. I think, thanks so much for that. I think from the general trajectory of what we've heard thus far, at some point, you have to have a conversation before something happens. But we're going to take some questions now. Over to you, Sandra.
Okay, so I think we've covered this already, but it says, at what point do we go from toxicity in the name of love to flat out abuse? And you said that they're hand in hand the same thing, essentially. So I think we've answered that. Another question says, what if one parent is a narcissist and one parent is an enabler? That's the same as toxic parenting. It has long-term effects.
Yeah, we said that to the beginning, isn't it?
Yes. Another question is, why do parents expect love from you when you're older after they've been toxic your whole life?
But you know what? the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that they don't recognize they're being toxic. As
Yeah.
far as they were concerned, they were loving you. So how dare you now be not, loving them back?
And that is the simple and that is the simple response to that, right? Most people who toxic relationship, oftentimes from what we've spoken about today, oftentimes is from a position of love rather than from a position of hate. So to them, they are doing the best that they think they know, right? And yeah, next one.
Okay. Next one is a bit long. Why does the church not connect the Bible commandment, children obey your parents, and the Bible verse, parents do not push your children to resentment? The church, especially the African church, just pushes you to obey your parents and forgive. Children are routinely abused under the cover of respect. I've had to discuss the toxic situationship I have with a parent who I love and who loves me with a church minister. Even though it was from a place of love, I was made to feel ungrateful, almost like a bad child, just because I was complaining and feeling bad about the situationship with my parent by the church minister.
Amazingly, I'm the only pastor here. So I can speak on behalf of the church, and I apologize to you for being or for feeling like that. At times, as ministers, it's easy for us to make the error when we don't have a full understanding of the situation, right? And I'm so sure the minister who advised you would not have advised just because they are not particular about your well-being. So I apologize in that wise. And on behalf of the church as well, there's no reason why the church should push one part of the Bible without pushing the other. It's just that, think about it, when we're talking with children, we will encourage them that, hey, obey your parents. When we're talking with parents too, we speak with them that, oh, do not push your children to do what they should not do, right? But what the Bible also says to us is that you should not rebuke an elder in public. Does that make sense? So it will not be appropriate for a minister to come on the pulpit and be chastising parents, right? It's easier to chastise children or to say, children, obey your parents or the pulpit. But when we come to men's meeting, women's meeting, the marriage spark meeting, then it's easier to say in such forums that, hey, you cannot do like this with your children, but you cannot be rebuking an elder in the presence of a child. That's why it appears that to a child, oh, the church is never saying anything in that wise.
I guess for me, the only thing I was thinking that if you're preaching on the pulpit, it would be a general statement. So it wouldn't be a rebuke of someone directly.
Yeah.
But also, I think based on the demographic of our church in general, oftentimes the complaint would probably be about you, about a parent. Hence why what comes your way would be about what you can do. Because unless the pastor or minister has direct access to your parent,
yeah,
they can never be in a position to say, please, can you change your ways, which makes it unfortunate for you that's in that position because we don't have access to your parent. Maybe they do, that's a different situation, but they can only talk to you because you're the person that they're pastoring. I hope
there are two classes that I've been thinking about. I don't know how it's going to work. Number one is parenting class, not only from a position of raising a baby, right, but from this whole thing, right, that even adults needs to go through it. Then the second one, actually, which I'm thinking of, which is very, very important, is in-laws. When you want to get married, it's also good for your mother-in-law and your father-in-law to also go through a class. You know where their limits are. I've been thinking about this and thinking about how this is going to be, but they need to know as well. Parents need to know that don't do this. God help us. Sandy.
Yeah, so we've focused like a good part of an hour to discuss, how like identifying toxic parents and, you know, what toxicity can look like. But how do we now, what work do we have to do? Because there's 3 people on here that aren't parents here. What work do we have to do to ensure that we don't become toxic parents ourselves? Oh, now everybody's quiet, yeah?
Oh, we've all got a hand up.
Yeah, the question is for the 3 of you, isn't it? We've got hands up. Jay, I want to know who Jay is.
Sorry.
Oh, Rev.
Hello.
Rev first, and then we'll.
Mom, you have to unmute yourself.
Rev is Sandra's mom.
Does she know that she's?
Oh, for goodness.
Hello. Okay, do you know what? We'll bring her.
Oh, she's on now. She's on now.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah.
We can hear you now, man.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Wow, you look good.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. I've been listening to everybody, and we all have a toxic parent or significant other in our lives. Pastor Pes said something about in-laws as well. You see, the reason why in Christian context, and I'm going to talk about Christian side of it and non-Christian, we have the parents, you know, like in Africa, children are seen, but they are not heard. And in that attitude, children grow up to learn from their parents. If the parent is loving, the children will bring out loving attitude towards others. But most of the time, especially in the Christian boundaries, we are always saying children are to be spanked. Spare the rod and spoil the child. And children there's another saying in Africa that they said children wisdom and adult wisdom gel together to make a city in Nigeria called Ife. You know, because sometimes what we have, the children can pick it up in the household. A parent might be arguing in their room and they will come out as if, oh, nothing happened. But the children can hear the toxicity of what they are doing inside. They have been cursing themselves, saying some words. So the father took his shirt and left the house. The mother is trying to make you to know that no, nothing happened. We are just talking about something. But this is always the same thing, the same thing, the same thing. So the children, you are teaching them that that's the norm. As a woman, when you get married, your husband can slap you. You don't need to tell your children. Just do it and then rub powder on your face again, which is very, very, very bad. It's detrimental to the children in the long run. And most of the parents who are toxic also is because they have been brought up in a toxicity home. So they have learned the pattern. So now when the child wants to say something, they will shut that child down. And shutting that child down will make that child to go to another significant adult. And this is where abuse raises up from. Because parents think they can dump you somewhere in a place. Because I've seen a cousin of mine was dropped to the uncle because the parents were fighting and they had to go on holiday, they had to go somewhere. But the children were dropped by the mother's brother, which is their uncle. And this uncle started to abuse this child, one of the girls, abusing that child. And another time when the parents are arguing again, they want to go away, they push those children to the uncle. But this child is telling the mom that I don't want to go to uncle, I don't want to go to uncle. They are not the parents because they are so engrossed in their own feelings. They did not even check why this child, whenever we said go to your uncle, she started to bring out tantrums and things like that. They never check that because they are so consumed in themselves that they've forgotten that the children are part of that family as well. And one thing you need to notice in parents who are toxic is that they put their children down unknowingly or knowingly. And if the husband is the one that you would tell the children, say, your mother is this, things like this is evil. It's a seed that has been sown to those children. So when they grow up, they will know, okay, yes, my father talked to my mom like this, so I have the right to talk to my wife like that. And this is what is going on. And it becomes a vicious circle. Because that's why we pray against generational curse. Because even in our home, back then, we know that our parents, the father, provide for the household. But because of his provision, it becomes the hierarchy. So anybody should shut up when it's okay. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. And they have the right, they can even say to you in front of your parents and your mother and say, no, I'm marrying somebody else. And somebody's coming to the house. And the children have nothing to say. The mother will take it on because she doesn't want to lose the husband or the home. Because if you go back when you are married in Africa, you cannot come back to your parents' home. Even if they kill you there, you have to stay there. You know, and we're teaching our children the same thing. Toxicity is up. Yeah.
Reverend Lucy, yeah. So your parents, yeah, would you say that they partook in toxic behaviors?
No, my father was a very, very, very wonderful man. My parents, because in our home, in a way, we have a law and a protocol in my home. But the protocol and the law, the rules that my father put down, is to safeguard us at that time. And we don't just talk anyhow. But for me, I'm a child that came and changed everything because I ask questions. Even if they kill me, I must say what.
Can I ask a question, man?
Huh?
Can I ask a question, man?
Yes.
This perspective that your home is perfect, right? Is it because you have now grown up and you can look back retrospectively and appreciate the things that they did? Or when you were younger than now, did you feel like, oh, it might, because it appears that that's what we see in this generation, right? That people might think that their home or their father or their mother is being toxic, only for them to now understand the full extent of things in future years.
Yeah, you see, in my home, I never saw my father and my mother arguing over something. We live in a house that all the children's, our chalet is different from where my parents' home building is. So I'd never seen my parents arguing, but I can tell the vibes that they are giving each other, I can tell. But for them to be fighting with one another, or arguing, I never see that.
No, mom, I would say, yeah, that grandma and granddad, yeah, did have some toxic behaviors. In terms of their from the stories that you told me, all of this.
Listen, Sandra. I said something earlier. Pastor Peck can bear me witness that. I said something that my dad has a protocol and rules. So rules, if the rule is broken, you will get the consequence of it. That's what I'm saying.
What if it was restricting your actual personal, like your oh my God, now my whole family is on here. What if it was actually restricting, that's my sister. What if it was actually restricting you from, you know, your own personal freedoms that you should have had as a child or as a teenager?
At that time, let me tell you one thing. I told you this before, and you know the story I told you about my dad. My dad, I went to a school where I went with those who are in the government and the president and all that kind of stuff. But my father will not let us go out. And I did say to you before, when I come back from school, we don't wear any clothes. We wear housewear in our home. I told you about the protocol and rules. So we don't wear anything. We can change our dresses 4 times in a day. The uniform in the morning, the afternoon, and then the night for the PJs. But my dad doesn't allow us to go out on our own. That's the thing. And it's difficult for us to bring, my brothers can bring friends home, but we are not allowed to go anybody's house.
Mom. So yes. with the parenting that you had, how did you ensure that you yourself didn't become a toxic parent?
Well, you can tell about that. Am I toxic to you?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. With the upbringing that you had, how did you make sure that it was different? Because I don't have that upbringing. I don't have, you know, I don't have grandma looking for me in the club with kerosene lamp. So
oh my God, Sandra, why do you have to say that one?
I don't have that. I'm just saying I don't have that. So how did you ensure?
Pastor, you see, Sandra is bringing something out. But Pastor, if you realize what I said earlier, I said we have rules. Did I not say that? I said we had rules and protocols.
No, what I'm saying is, how did you ensure that you didn't have that same kind of parenting style when you had your own children?
Yeah. You see, what happened is that I need to go. I love going to my grandma's place because I have freedom. And my grandma lives in Surulere, North Island. So when I come to my grandma, I can do all things. So one day my grandma asked me to go and get something from the petrol station or something like that. And there was a party going on. So I got those things that she needed and I hid it somewhere in the corner and I went to the party. But I think when she asked after me, because my father can come anytime and deal with my grandma for letting me out of the streets. So therefore, I went to that party, leaving that so that when I finish at the party, I would then go home with the gallon of what she asked me to go and get for her. But I think somebody snitch that I've been here. Stop laughing. Why are you laughing? So somebody snitch and they said I was at the party. So my dad is a disco, but Pastor Pei, you know about the disco we have in Nigeria with all the bubble, all the lights, all the yellow. So my grandma came looking for me with a lamp or like a lamp in his hand and a stick. So I jumped off the window to go to my home. Because he would deal with me right there and then, and I don't want that disgrace. The disgrace number one is that she came with a stick in her hand and a lamp. So obviously I had to disappear. That's it. I know that what I did was wrong. But that's my
do you think that was good? Do you think that was good? It's not bad, is it? You should have done the same thing to Sandra.
No. I felt bad, but I still love my grandma because my grandma is only protecting me and herself because my dad can come there anytime. Because my daddy knew that
why didn't you do the same thing to Sandra?
I don't have to. My children are my friends. I don't deal that because I'm a youth worker and I've learned. I can't tell on myself. So I knew how to deal with my children. So therefore, I can tell them anything. I'm empowering my own children. My own upbringing.
It's okay.
My own upbringing. I'm always talking. Nobody can stop. I'll say it. Even
it's clear.
Thanks so much. Let's celebrate.
Thanks, mommy. Thank you. Thank you.
Over to Jackie.
It is well. I think Jackie needs to answer. Jackie's asking a question.
Jackie, go.
I wasn't going to ask a question. All I was going to say, in the Black community, this is why we need to talk to each other. Like, if you go to Jewish communities or Asian communities, the elders have open and honest conversations with their younger lot and the children. And I think that's why I'm a very firm believer in therapy, because you have to be self-aware. And the older you get, the more you realize about life and how the world works and all of that goodness. But in a space where if you're a younger child, then it's on the parent to have self-awareness to go, if I say X, Y, and Z, or if I do X, Y, and Z, they are a carbon copy of me. As much as we do not believe that we're like our parents, we turn into them. Sandra's definitely turned into my mom.
Sandra, you're talking to your mom.
It's okay. It's not bad.
So it's that thing of just learning about being self-aware. And
exactly, my darling. Tell them.
Yes, mother, thank you. I'm the second born, so Sandra got the discipline and I got to live easy, breezy. So I had more space to rebel, but I also wasn't a bad criminal, so nobody found about my crimes. Sandra got caught more than I did.
And I'm living okay. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Thank you, family.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Good to see you after a very long time. You need to repent, Jackie.
Jackie, help mom get off, please. Bye.
Interesting.
Right.
Oh my God, we spent so much time now.
Yeah. So I don't know if we got even further into I think what we need to do is to enable open communication with each other and with our parents as well, because they might not even identify that their behavior is something that's detrimental to you and your well-being. So knowing the right time to speak up is always going to be beneficial. But if we don't know the right time, is there somebody or is there anyone that we can go to in the church to help us mediate in this instance? Because I think communication is the gateway to, healing and growing up and ensuring that you have a healthy relationship. But how do we do this if we have this you know, we have to respect our elders kind of thing in the back of our head? Is there anything in church that can do this?
Yeah, the reality of it is that whether the Bible says it or not, we have to respect our elders, right? And if you have that at the back of your mind, that, hey, I need to communicate this with my parents without disrespecting them, right? I'm so sure God gives each and every one of us wisdom, right? I'm so sure there's a better way of doing things or saying things without having to stir up the hornet, right? Approach it in a way that befits a child of God. Does that make sense? Talk to them, like I said, about how their action makes you feel rather than questioning their action. I always say something: separate issue from the person. Talk about the issue, not the person, right? Don't try to say like, oh, this is a bad way of doing. No, don't the person, or talk about the issue, how it makes you feel, right? Aside that, if it's something that you cannot do, if your father or your mother is a Christian, easy, right? At worst, speak with your pastor, or even if they don't attend your church, there's a way that their pastor can be gotten involved, even if they are across the ocean. Does that make sense? The biggest challenge will be if they are not of the same faith as you.
Okay, Pastor Ope, that's the how. How do we know the when? When should we do this?
There will be no specific time for that, because the reality of it is you are the one that knows how it's affecting you, right? So if you think that something is affecting you and it's really getting to you, then it's better to speak out on it, right? But I always tell people to first check themselves if there's something they can do from within them first, because at times it's easy for us to point to their parents and say it's the parents that's doing this, but you might be the one that stirs it up. So let's check ourselves first. But if you think that you've done the best that you can do, then please speak out. Don't even wait. There's no time that is up. Speak out if it's affecting you, because things like this can actually lead to suicide. Things like these are the reasons why a lot of people do things that becomes irreversible. I know the story of someone who had issues with a parent, and before you know it, from that minute on, she went to the boyfriend's house, like joke like this, she got pregnant. It's irreversible. At times it creates rebellion in us, and with every rebellious action, we might end up regretting things in life generally. So it's better to speak out rather than take actions unnecessarily.
Yeah, there's a what if the pastor's the toxic parent and that's who you have to open up to?
Yeah, no. If the pastor is a toxic parent, there'll be somebody else that you can speak up to. You can speak to, at least a minister in church. They get it. Let's assume, God forbid, I'm a toxic parent to my son, right? There should be somebody in church that you can speak up to, who can be like, Pastor, this is what we read. This is what your son brought to me. Does that make sense? So I don't think it should be that difficult.
I mean, yes and no, except if the person is that toxic, speaking to them might also be the end of that person. It depends on the situation and the level of abuse or toxicity, and if it needs to be taken to even, I don't know, governmental bodies. Because there's some people that actually flare up by the fact that you have spoken about it. If the pastor is in a place of toxicity and they're a narcissist.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You cannot just take things from the first point straight to governmental, right? You must first try to mediate. Do you get it? So the minute you speak with a minister about it in church, responsibility is placed on that minister to do something about it. In fact, they need to do about it. Does that make sense? If I've been spoken to that person, even scripture says it, that if you have something against someone, speak with that person first. If there's no one, let's assume that Jack comes to me and say, oh, my minister, who is my pastor, is doing so. Yeah, I will talk to the pastor about it. If the pastor refuses, I will bring another minister alongside to come and talk to the pastor about it. If that pastor did not do anything, we'll go to government.
Okay, so if you've tried all of this thing, is it ever okay? I think it is, but I'm asking you, is it ever okay for you to just end that relationship? I mean, if there's no healing to come from it, there's no growth to come from it, is it okay for you to just end that relationship?
I really pray that none of us gets to that point, right? But at times the best way to manage some relationships are from afar, right? Listen, I've had relationships that we've had to advise the person to move out of home. It does not mean that that person stop being your mom or your dad, right? But maybe because you are present with that person is what is causing the toxicity. So it might be more advisable for you to actually move out from home or to move out from the person's vicinity, as it were. Yeah, that's happened several times.
I think a lot of healing needs to come in place in terms of parents, like the parental and child relationship, especially
and see,
adults.
Let me say this: your parents are a relationship that is imposed on you by God, right? Because they have a part to play in your life. So God's plan really is that you should have a wonderful relationship with them as much as possible to be able to get the benefit that comes from it and the blessing that comes from it. So please, I'm appealing to you, if for any reason you're having issues in this wise, understand that it is not normal, right? And you don't have to just be groaning in silence, right? Please speak up, right? Nobody is an island of knowledge or wisdom. Nobody knows it all. Parenting is a difficult thing. Remember, there's no book on parenting that is right, that's correct. No matter, even if you go to a class of parenting that they teach you for 10 years, one thing about the child might just change everything. So please, please, please speak with your parents if you can. If you cannot do that, bring in someone who you think they might listen to. If you cannot do that, please escalate it to your pastor, right? It's part of the reason why the church is there, to help heal anything that God imposes on you.
Okay. Okay, I think we'll take this as the last question, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
How can one identify a toxic parental relationship, particularly when you've always been in boarding school all your life till university level, and eventually something drastic and gruesome happens, events happen, I think? Something
all right,
drastic.
so there's a list, there's a set of, all those things that you put on the group earlier, Marilyn. We'll put them on the Instagram page. Is that okay? As things to look out for. Does that make sense? Yeah, Marilyn?
Identifiers.
Yeah, identifiers. Yeah, God bless you. See, English is failing me. Yeah, we'll put them on that way you'll be able to identify them. All right, next. Like, a friend needs answer.
No, I think that question was,
that's why I wanted to ask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Any takeaways? Takeaways from this, Marilyn?
Not particularly that anything else I have to say. Toxicity is a function of life as human beings. And I think, to be honest, without God, we can all end up in the wrong side of it. And that's why we have the Holy Spirit to keep checking us, because there are times when I know that I can lash out at people. And I always keep reminding myself that if I'm married now with children, and anytime I'm in a bad mood, I'm doing that to them, it's not nice. So I'm trying to work on me because I ain't trying to pass it on. However, I'm not a perfect person either. So these are things that may happen.
From my side, two things. What Jackie said, that we need to be self-aware, whether you are a child or you're a parent, you need to be self-aware because the things that happen with your parents, also the things that your parents are doing, you also have a tendency of doing it. So you need to pay attention to that. The second thing I will put through is the little way I try to handle my son, more so because I never had a father in my life. My father left when I was 8 days. So for me, I always look at things from the position of how do I want God to handle me or to treat me? Do you get it? That's a question. So for example, he did something wrong yesterday. I punished him. while he was undergoing the punishment, I had to think too that what about if God punished you for a long time? So I have to tell him now it's enough, you can go. You get it? So I have to keep asking myself that question because that is the only fatherly example that I have.
My main takeaway was that communication is necessary. You as an individual is going to know when your limit is, and when that limit comes, if you do need a mediator, you should be able to go to people around you or your church to be able to do that. But yeah, healing is required essentially, and we all need some assistance in that aspect.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for everyone that joined. Thank you for everyone that dialed in and was interacting. I think it was.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Topic.
Yeah, well done. And next week, the topic is church hurts.
Church hurts. Oh, wow. That's another heavy. Oh, wow. I think I'll call in sick for that one. But thank you, everyone. Thank you. Church hurts next week.
Thanks for
listening. Bless you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.